Today's conversation is about the first European company to reach a 500 billion euro valuation. They're the only European company in the global top 10 behind the likes of Apple and Tesla. Yes, we are talking about the iconic global fashion group LVMH, which stands for Moet Hennessey Louis Vuitton. LVMH is run by the richest man in the world, Bernard Arnault, who at the time of this recording is currently worth $236 billion. Today, we're going to discuss the key drivers for their success, how they've been able to manage risk over the years, and interestingly, how Bernard has actually organized his family for long-term generational wealth and future success.
Take off, take flight with you. For we never fly, but we're flying.
Before we kick off, let's find out everyone has enjoyed their bank holiday weekend. Shuo, how have you been over the last couple of days? How have you spent the time?
Yeah, all good. Good to see you guys. It's been a couple of weeks since our last group episode. From my end, bank holiday weekend was really good. I think over the 2-3 days, I was on the road about 11 hours. One of the days we spent with my wife's family. We had like a family event of 20 people. Went to the Cotswolds for a day, done a family picnic and all that fun stuff. And then another day went to Birmingham for another family event, a birthday on my side of the family. This was a 1-year-old birthday party, and there were almost 150 people there. So it was a family-filled weekend, but it was really nice to see everyone, especially after the month of Ramadan. And now, obviously, a couple of weeks post Ramadan, it's nice to get back into a normal routine, early starts, early morning gym workouts. Hopefully, Ollie, you're not getting any late night notifications from me anymore. It's back to the morning flow. But otherwise, yeah, good to be back in the swing of things. Olu, how are you actually with that? Olu, how was your break? Because you've been obviously traveling again on that CFO bag. So tell us about your latest trip.
Far from. I decided to go to Israel. So I think it was a Friday night. I realized I didn't have any plans for the bank holiday weekend. Started looking online, looking at cheap flights, offers, deals, and I saw a flight to Tel Aviv. And I said, oh, why not? Did some research first, just to see how safe it was, because, I remember watching this video on Instagram where the guy was like, oh, he's travel hackers. He travels to places where there's been some sort of war or something going on there, why they discount the price. So I was like, let me just make sure it's completely safe for me to travel, and not just go based on the price. But Tel Aviv was amazing, really safe, friendly people. Did a day tour of Jerusalem, which was amazing as well. So it was a great bank holiday weekend. Highly recommend it. Had a lot of fun.
So wait, I didn't know it was two things. One, I respect you on the fact that it was kind of a spontaneous trip, because I know you mentioned this at the back end of last year. You wanted to do this more, right? Enjoy your, let's say, your hard-earned money. But at the same time, I am surprised at the fact that you just literally went ahead. So you flew out Saturday. You saw it on Friday and flew out Saturday.
So I basically booked it 10 hours before my flight. So packed my bags and was like, hand luggage. I'm only there for 3 nights. And I went.
Cool. Do you see yourself doing that again?
Yeah, for sure. No, I think I need to better plan.
Okay.
I don't. There's no need for me to do it 10 hours before, right? But I think I need to better look forward and say, okay, when do I have periods that I'm free? It'll probably be cheaper. I can also suggest it to friends as well, to see if they want to go as well. So yeah.
Hopefully that inspires a couple of our listeners. Be more spontaneous.
Someone else was traveling, but they had a different experience when it came to coming back or returning. Daniel, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all good. I'm still recovering from a very hectic weekend that I'm still trying to calculate and remember which day of the week it is. But I thought today was Wednesday a few months ago, but it's a Tuesday. But yeah, I was away for work in Austin, Texas. Very nice city, quite quiet, very hot. Some tornado alerts as well at the same time. Some delicious barbecued meat. And I think the highlight was probably the return for not very pleasant reasons. It was an adventure that I didn't plan, of being TLDR, long story short. Sorry. Hey, Nanny, cut this out, man. I swear it. Ollie, you throw me off.
Hold it down. Come on, man. Come on, professional. Hold it down. Come on.
That's what they know for as well.
It's a playing in my head. I was trying to hold it down, but I fumbled because I started smiling. And
listen, we're gonna be doing live shows soon. You gotta hold it down. Come on, go.
So my flight so I was going back to London via JFK. My flight was 12:55. I got there in good time by about 10 a.m. Just thought I wasn't sure what customs was going to look like. And I got then notified that my flight was delayed from 12:55 to 2:30, then 2:30 to 3:25, 3:25 to 5, then 5 to 7, 7 to 8, 19, 8:19 to 8:45, 8:45 to 9:05. So in between that, after about 5 o'clock, I had to keep changing my connecting flight at JFK to later because it was clear that I was going to miss it. Then the reality of me having to sleep at JFK became a reality. So I tried to jump on the direct flight from Austin to London because at the time of me booking, it was a full flight because of everyone that was in town for the conference. I got to the gate and tried to say, can I buy a ticket? They said, no, they don't issue tickets. I looked online. There was one business class ticket left for about, £9,000. I was like, I ain't getting back. So I tried to go through the travel agent to cancel my current flight to get a direct flight. But by the time they picked up, the seat had gone and the flight was soon leaving. So I wasn't going to make it. And so I then went to the desk to see what alternative routes were. The one that I decided to take was to fly to Los Angeles for 3.5 hours, then fly back on myself to London, which was a 11-hour flight. And the reason I decided for that was one, because it was a longer flight for me to actually try and get some sleep on the flight. And that was the real reason. And I had a 54-minute layover time. So I thought it leaves me in good time. The flight got there in good time, and then time quickly eroded. I had 26 minutes to get to my connecting flight whilst being on my flight. I then kind of just was asking everyone to move out the way to get off the flight. I ran from Terminal 5 to Terminal 4. At the same time, I'm bursting for the toilet. I'm on the airline calls me to ask where I am to see if I could make it. And I'm trying to. I said I'm running. I'm running. I'm running as fast as I can. I said, but I'm bursting for the toilet. Can I use it? He goes, no, we just need you on the flight. You'll do all of that when you get on. I'm running towards the gate and I see one man running towards me. He's like, are you Mr. Johnson? I said, yeah. He said, come. Just pass my passport. He said, just come through. I'm like starting to sweat. Everyone else is there, sitting down, drinking their drinks and not knowing the flight is there, still on the tarmac because of me. So yeah, I unloaded and finally I was grateful to be on the flight because it would have been a 15-hour wait in LAX. But if that was going to happen, I was going to hit up at AJ anyway. So
that's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking. little sweet chick. Trust me.
Yeah. Then I got back to London. Got to the baggage hall. My bag was not there. So my bag came this afternoon, 2 days later. But all in all, good trip. Grateful that I got back safely in the bag. I wasn't really in need of anything urgently. So yeah. But yeah, good week. Eventful weekend. Trying to battle traveling across different time zones. And yeah, I'll be back off again in a couple of weeks. So that's how I'm doing.
Boy, me? I was at home with my family and my kids.
Wait.
Drive anywhere. I didn't fly anywhere. I just chilled. Go on. I'm just joking. Go on, Daniel.
I was gonna say, Olu always says, I'm a man of few words. Olu, does that pass your credit, your check?
Few words?
You usually say when you ask how am I, you say I'm a man of few words.
I've already
so does that pass? Does my response
Oh, okay. Yes. No, check? Yes. It's much better than last week. I think last time we did an episode, you were just like, fine. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's it. But that was much better, at least. But I'm happy that you got home.
Great. I feel great. Echo Shua's point. It's now the second week from Ramadan, so it's great to have experienced the month, but also be in a position where you can reflect and build on from the month and get back into a strong routine. And effectively, have food and drink to fuel you. So from that standpoint, really good. And then, bank holiday weekend, just a lot of family time. That's sort of what I try to prioritize. Kids are great. Lauren's great. So we're good. Like I said, I didn't fly anywhere. We didn't drive anywhere. We just stayed at home. So you guys might want to try that. It's too much going on.
You didn't buy a property over the bank holiday. I know that's your sort of level. I don't, we're here going traveling. You know, generational wealth.
No. Next one on the next holiday. Cool. Now with that, LVMH. Let's jump into it. And I think it would be quite important to provide some background on the man behind LVMH, Bernard Arnault, and his early years, because I think it will really help the listeners to better understand his business philosophy, the vision, and the level of success in which he's actually achieved to date. So, some basic background. So Bernard is 74 years of age. He was born and raised in France, and he studied engineering at one of the most prestigious schools. After graduating, he worked for his father's civil engineering business, and shortly after joining, convinced his father to sell the construction arm and focus on real estate. He later became the CEO and then worked in that leadership role for around 10 years. His interest for luxury brands was actually inspired by his mother, and his first real deal that really got him started was Dior. Dior at the time was owned by a textile company, and in 1984, the parent company had filed for bankruptcy. So Bernard, with his experience and aspirations of wanting to own a historical set of brands, saw the opportunity and was able to actually raise 50 million from the business, 45 million then from the investment bank Lazard to actually close the deal. He then sold off some of the textile assets, only to keep Dior and Le Bon Marché department store, profiting 500 million euros in the process. And this was all achieved by the age of 35. So with that, you really start to get a sense of the level of success that he tasted at such an early age. And maybe it's no surprise that we see the level of success that where LVMH has reached now. So after that, LVMH was next. The company itself was actually founded in 1987 through a merger between Louis Vuitton and Moet Hennessey. Strategically, the merger was actually intended to provide diversification for Louis Vuitton and protection from a hostile takeover bid for Moet Hennessey. Bernard became involved with LVMH sort of a year later, as the founders were actually looking for investment. And with his aspiration, as I mentioned, to sort of create that brand of luxury goods, of course, he was very excited by the opportunity. So once he secured his stake, he then, safe to say, worked very aggressively to increase his ownership stake, where he could actually have majority control, later becoming chairman, and then literally, ultimately, the last one standing to actually run the business. Today, LVMH is a global luxury conglomerate which sells over 75 brands across 5,600 stores, right from to perfumes, wines, leather goods, and watches. Just to name a few brands, we're talking about Louis Vuitton, Christian Dior, Givenchy, Fendi, Hublot, Tag, Tiffany & Co. recently, Dom Perignon, and the list goes on.
Isn't that
In
your
2000,
wardrobe?
sorry?
I thought you were listing your wardrobe.
No, not yet.
Okay.
In 2022, they generated just over 79 billion euros, and that revenue is up from 23% versus last year, with profits of around 21 billion, providing them with a very healthy margin of 26%. The majority of their revenue is driven by their fashion and leather goods, with their highest share of sales coming from the Asian market. Financially, they're in a very, very strong position as a company with strong cash flows and very little debt relative to their actual size. So the question after all that is how? How have they been able to grow, right, from 1988, where Louis Vuitton was doing about $1 billion in sales, to where they are now to around 80 billion in sales, and the owner, sees there a lot more growth moving forward. So thoughts on what have been some of their key drivers that you guys have identified when just sort of looking at this story? Sure, I don't know if you want to kick off.
For me,
Daniel, please.
I was gonna say, I think for me, when you look at Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessey, and the brands that are under the umbrella, like Bulgari, Dior, Givenchy, Veuve Clicquot. Although I hope my French is passing your French check from the 4 months you studied. The 4 months you lived in France.
Well, I had my understanding is out of all of us, Olu is the most fluent. Then it's Daniel. Then it's Pete.
Well, we can find out.
No.
Because Olu,
ce n'est pas possible.
Well, Olu said that he would do the last part, in French, so we can get to that part. Daniel, continue.
Actually, I remember that. Sorry, yeah.
Vraiment, Olu, vraiment. La licence, s'il vous plaît.
La licence, s'il vous plaît. That's his only line, his number one line. La licence, s'il vous plaît.
La licence, s'il vous plaît. And directions.
No, but jokes aside. But when you look at like Moet and Chandon, these are all different, I would say, diversified group products that they have. And as P, you mentioned, from leather goods to cosmetics to perfumes to couture to spirits to retail to luxury hotels and media, it's a very diverse conglomerate of a group, and it's kind of a behemoth of a group. And I think one of the strategies, as you mentioned, that Bernard Arnault took on was the merger of Louis Vuitton Hennessey, and I believe in 1987, and rapidly over time that's grown. I'm going to bring kind of music into this in a moment as well, because I just think it's a good touch point. But one strategy that they really did was, rather than starting from scratch, the group has followed a very simple strategy of acquiring prestigious brands from the very beginning. That's a key thing. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're taking brands that are established, well known, and just putting that within their group. For example, many of the groups that are under the company, many people don't even know it's part of LVMH. For example, Sephora, the cosmetic company, many people don't know it's part of LVMH. And their traditional know-how of creativity and a sense of innovation has enabled them to showcase French excellence to the world. And they've also become very, very good and done craftsmanship very well. And it's part of that symbol of French luxury. And just to give you, I think P, you mentioned it, to give an enormity of how many products or brands are under their umbrella, it's 60 prestigious brands, not just 60 brands, 60 prestigious brands with more than 3,000 stores and 160,000 employees, which now are considered the leader in the luxury goods market. And P, you're asking, how have they come to this? The secrets, I think, to the success is that they've been able to allow each brand to develop independently. They've given them full autonomy, but at the same time, brands develop smart synergies with each other to avoid a head-on competition. For example, in research products. I think that's a key thing, because research can be a key revenue drainer or key cost drainer when looking at launching products and go-to-market strategies. The group has also relied on a wide range of investors, from Christian Dior, which the Arnault family own, 97%, basically the whole group. And they're the majority shareholder of they're the majority shareholder of LVMH of 46%. They also have 40% from foreign institutional investors, 9% French investors, and 4% of individuals. And then when you look at how diversified their brands are and the revenues that they generate, is fashion and leather goods are 37% of their revenues. Selective retailing is 28% of their revenues. Wine and spirits, 16%, and I probably play a part into that, but probably not a big number. Perfumes and cosmetics, 14%. Yeah, probably me again. Watches and jewelry, 5%. That's P and Chouel. So when you look at that, I think it's really clear that they've a diverse stream of incomes, different revenue streams to the company. And even the part that I'd say in this day and age, influencers play indirectly. They're not being paid, but when you look at, say, Instagram and people influencing on Instagram or flexing, when have you not seen someone wear Louis Vuitton? When have you not someone see Givenchy or something expensive, or in the club popping bottles of Moet and Chandon? So I think it's clear that this also influences our consumer spending by looking at habits, looking at trends of what's going on in the influencer lifestyle on Instagram, what's happening in clubs or the people in high life, and therefore also driving our spending habits. I'll pause there. Time out.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thank you, Daniel. Chouel, your thoughts on some of their key drivers?
Yeah, amazing. I think first of all, actually, I would say, Pete, solid introduction. I think the history that you gave, the background and the key financials, I think really set the scene. And then I think, Daniel, the way that you've talked about the business model and the success factors have been great as well. I think the only thing that I would probably add from my end is maybe for the listeners, some frameworks that we can apply on both what Pabilo and Daniel have said, so you can think about it from your own business perspective. I think the first piece is that if you think about the top of the funnel, the macro picture, how Daniel has really laid out from the foundation, their business model is really entrepreneurship through acquisition. So you won't be hearing any startup brands being created within LVMH. They're really trying to go for these legacy brands that have been around for tens of years, hundreds of years, ideally, that really have stuck around. And these are brand names that resonate around the world. So they are really focused on this entrepreneurship through acquisition. I think the next framework that I was looking at that they based on their business is, if you think about, okay, from a company perspective, it's really got a full vertical integration. So as Daniel mentioned with Sephora, for example, that's a department store that sells makeup. Within the LVMH group, they've got their own makeup brands, and within those brands, they also own the factories that create the makeup. Now they are applying this to the different categories that Daniel has said. So the spirits, the leather goods, all these fashion houses have been vertically integrated. And once you own that full supply chain, then you've got a strong purchasing power. You can really manage costs as well, and you can ultimately charge higher prices as well, especially if you own the store at the end, like LVMH, and you get that interaction with the customer at the end of the funnel. So I think that vertical integration from a business is something that we can definitely admire. I think the last thing is just on the actual product itself. So using a frame that we've discussed in previous episodes around people, products, process. So process, once you've got, as Daniel said, 60 brands, then the process of manufacturing a brand can easily be scaled. The distribution of distributing these goods around the globe can also be scaled. So that's an element on the process where if you start to get that economies of scale at an 80 billion revenue level, you really start to see the results. From a people perspective, I think what they've also been able to do amazingly well is attract great talent to their brands. People like Virgil Abloh, Kanye West has been linked to it before with partnerships, and now they've been able to attract Pharrell, people like Jay-Z, Beyonce. Now they want to work for them because it's not just LVMH, it's really a roster of brands that you can be involved with. And Bernard is someone that clearly has done extremely well. So from a business perspective, to be seen as a partner to him is something that can really be attractive for people wanting to build a career or partnership. I think the last thing is around the products. So the products speak for themselves. They won't be able to charge and get 20-30% margin if it wasn't a high quality product. And again, once you've got a roster of these brands, then it just amplifies it even more. So some great frameworks, I think, for us to learn from, and many success factors. So that's why I'm curious to understand from a generational wealth perspective what we could also learn together.
Yeah, no, thank you, Shaw. I'll just add a bit of color to one of the points that Daniel mentioned and collect some thoughts also from Olu on what's making them successful. You spoke earlier about one of their key drivers has been this sort of acquisition, right? And if you look at the timeline, they literally have gone on this acquisition spree of every year or 2 years, they're actually acquiring another asset, if you want to call it that. And there was an interesting story that I came across where Bernard at the time, before he got involved with LVMH, took a trip to the US, and he was traveling, and he had a conversation with the taxi driver, and he said to him, "Do you know about our French president?" And the driver responded by saying, "I don't know about your French president, but I know about Dior." And what he learned from that was in his world, value is equal to history. So the longer standing history brand there is, the more value it has. And it's almost like, and I think that's one of the philosophies they've taken in. Let's acquire the brands that have had the longest standing history. So I think that's a tapping into philosophy and how that's kind of played through over the last sort of couple of years. But definitely maybe they've been, one of the best, right, in taking those global leadership positions with these brands and acquiring over the years. Olu, just to get also your thoughts on maybe some of the things that you noticed when talking about the success of LVMH.
Let me do my French. Wait. Let me do my French.
You sound like Joey Barton when he done the interview.
Bernard,
Marseille.
So Bernard a créé un empire, ᴠɪᴇᴡs. So for the non-French speakers, what I basically said was Bernard created his empire really focusing on brands. And I think the story that
what did you say?
Wait, no, like that. Leave it.
I was actually going to ask Olu to close his eyes and say that again.
Because I'm reading it from my screen. I had Google Translate. But no, I really love that story that you mentioned, P, because it's funny how important brand is to people. Like, you might not know the president, but there's certain staple names, and a lot of times in business, what they class it as is goodwill, right? It's intangible value, right? You can't basically put a value, a dollar amount of it. It's not like a factory or manufacturing or whatever. It's just the namesake and the brand. And in so many cases, people don't realize by creating something or acquiring a massive brand, automatically the way people think about it, and especially in the fashion industry and beauty industry, there's certain names that are household names, right? That people connect with prestige, people connect with the flashy lifestyle. I think Daniel's mentioned it in music, etc., right? That aspirational, oh, this item means status, means wealth, right? And he understood that from an early age to say, look, and in most of these cases, I'm sure he even overpaid for some of these names and certain brands at the time, right? But he understood the importance of, if I can get these brands, put them into our ecosystem, and Shawaz talked about putting them in their process. I'm sure they've had innovations based on all the different acquisitions they've done. I can generate a massive value in the future. I'll say that that's a big thing that I've sort of taken away from this topic, and just looking into how he moved. There was also some dark, it's not all pretty, right?
Of course,
Especially when
of
you're
course,
doing company takeovers,
of
right?
course.
If you've watched a show called Succession, you'll know that some of these takeovers can be ruthless. So for the amount of wealth he's generated at such a young age and all these companies that he's acquired, I know it must have been some tense moments.
Yeah, the operative word that I used in my introduction was that he aggressively increased his ownership stake. But yeah, definitely people should read on further to understand exactly
What that means.
sort of how he's dedicated and how he's committed himself to being in the position that he is. But I wanted to ask you guys about the user experience, because I'm sure, I think everybody in here has purchased some product from Louis Vuitton at some point. Daniel's shaking his head. I know he has. But maybe you can talk a little bit about the user experience, how you felt when you went into the store, because I guess that also plays a big role. A lot of the times, I think people are attracted to these brands because of that user experience. They get treated differently than if they went to a mid-market player like Ralph Lauren, for example. So it starts from the moment you walk in. So maybe I don't know, Daniel, sure, you can talk a little bit about how that also has played a role in separating what it feels like to buy from others.
Yeah, sure. So when I went to AliExpress.com, I went to search for.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so when I went into, I remember vividly, I think it was the first time I purchased something was maybe 2014 from Louis Vuitton. I went to Louis Vuitton store in the village in Westfield, and I went to get myself a wallet. Went to purchase a wallet rather, and I went to get it. What's the word? Is it monogram? Is it not monogram? What's the word?
Personalized.
Engraved. Yes, right. It evaded me. Yeah, I went to get personalized, and I think I must have ordered it online, I believe, initially before going in store. So I didn't want to make 2 trips. So I think my first user experience was probably on the online store, which is very clean, very easy to use, easy to navigate. So I'll probably focus more on the website, the user experience from a online perspective, commerce perspective. And when you look onto the Louis Vuitton store on the website, very easy to use. It's got like small leather goods, large leather goods. Some of them are in multiple sections, but very easy to navigate. And then I opted for the personalization, which is to inscribe my initials and put DJ, which it informed me it will take a few weeks or so, and it will inform me when it's ready for collection. I then went to the store in Westwood to pick up the item. And I think from whether you're buying something or just your general customer experience and the service you receive when you go into the store, they're very restrictive of how many people are in the store at a particular period of time. The reason being is not that it's usually from a point of, it could be point of theft and safety, but it's more for the personalization of your experience. They always want to ensure that there is a representative from the store to assist you on your journey. So whether that's looking at items, whether that's asking about items, they're there to really not be a personalized shopper, but they're there to assist you from the moment you walk in to the moment you either purchase or you exit the store. One thing I've always found very credible about each staff member is their knowledge of the products. They can tell you about the leather. They can tell you about the quality of the leather. They can tell you about how to look after to ensure longevity. So I think it's quite impressive that these are people who really are into luxury leather goods to know about its sort of history, to talk about the quality, to offer their opinions, and to maybe show similar items, what is new, what's old, what's coming soon, what's no longer on sale, because sometimes items you may know from the last season are no longer on sale in store. So it's very good to know that whoever's assisting you is, has the knowledge, is credible, they're on hand to help and assist you. It's very much a personalized experience because there aren't so many people in store. And my usual experience in there has been quite positive. The last time I went in store was actually in July of last year when we were in Copenhagen, but there was a long queue near to Cheryl's apartment. So yeah, but yeah, all in all, good. I focus on Louis Vuitton rather than any of the other products. But yeah, Cheryl, I'll pass it over to you about your experiences.
Yes, definitely they excel with the smaller things, I would say. I think I always remember the first experience and the last experience. The first experience was 2012, 2013, got that full-time Swiss contract. And I think after the first year, I decided to buy myself a Rolex watch and an LV bag. So that tells you my state of mind at that time frame.
You and Daniel, I know why P asked you two to do this topic. You guys are balling, man. Lend me a fiver. You guys
This
are
is 2012, 2013. But I remember the first experience because obviously I was a bit apprehensive, right? If I think about the bag, at the time it was just over 1,000. Spending 1,000 on a bag at any time frame is wild, right? Especially when you're 22, 23 years old. But I remember walking into the shop, and as Daniel has said, the customer service is impeccable. They're not rushing you to buy. There's always space in the store, and each of the associates really know their business. And I think since then, whenever I've had any issues with the bag, say if the strap breaks or this has started to fray, etc., I go back in and they replace it. Obviously at a slightly expensive cost, but they do replace it. And I think they also keep track of that as well. And when I recently went in Copenhagen last year, for a mentor of mine, I bought him a small gift. It was a scarf. And then even with that, because I've been with them, they type in my name even in Copenhagen, and they've got all my details. I don't need to tell them everything again. Packaging was really great, and it's just that continuous high quality experience. And I think what Daniel just alluded to, the fact that now since post pandemic they limit the number of people in store, so people are now having to queue up, and it presents this image of scarcity, of demand, of luxury. I think it just amplifies the brand even more. So yeah, really, really positive experiences, at least of that specific brand.
Olu, any experience with Louis Vuitton you'd like to share?
Nah, don't have any experience. I need to step up my game.
The early experience Olu has is buying Veuve Clicquot and Dom Perignon in the club.
I was trying my hardest not to laugh, but no, I can only, the only thing I'll add to what you guys are saying is
You got experience as well.
Of course. First of all, what I would say is I think that everything that you guys are mentioning is like a key business lessons, right? So you spoke about the staff that work there and their product knowledge and their understanding of what they're trying to sell you. But I think the other thing is you want to be associated with the brand. So when I purchased my product from Louis Vuitton, all I wanted to do thereafter was show it, right? So you feel if I'm in a lunch with someone, I'm putting it on the table, and it was this I'm connected to such a prestigious brand. So it's again, my mindset was, that's a 2012 mindset. It's changing now, but it's all part of that user experience, and you wanting to sort of live through that. I think maybe some other key drivers, just before we move on to sort of how they've managed risk, is you can see, although we've gone through the period of COVID, you could even argue during that period, people obviously built up a level of savings. If you couple that with being able to sort of increase prices across their brands, they're obviously going to do very, very well. I think markets like India and China have actually grown over the years, have also become key players in what they've done. So that's also helped their sales. And I think you can almost start to see a monopoly situation, right? The only way to really compete with LVMH is you need to have a brand that's been in the market for 50, 60 years, right? So once they've acquired these prestigious brands, it's kind of set precedents and they can establish their global position. So, but yeah, really, really great points as to sort of how they've been able to achieve success over the years. Maybe just a couple of thoughts on risks, right? Maybe some of the risks that they might face or they have faced, and maybe how they've dealt with some of these challenges. Anything that comes to mind? Olu, thoughts around that?
Yeah, sure. So when I think about the risks that they face, I think the first one we can talk about is the pandemic, right? They would have had to deal with the supply chain disruption during that period of time. I think we saw that a lot of luxury goods brands had issues with either if it was transportation during that sort of COVID period of time, or if it was so logistics and sort of supply chain issues during that period of time, right? Which they were able to sort of deal with and recover. Also, it probably made their brand more exclusive, like Shuwal talked about scarcity, right? If there's less of it, also a lot of companies utilize that time to increase prices. And when you've got, like we said before, such premium brands, right? You can justify increasing the price. Can't justify increasing it as much in Primark or whatever, etc. But LV you can. The next big one that they had, and I know this might have felt like in the future, but there was a lot of trade tensions within China, right? I know when we look at the revenue, it fell by, I think it was 27.5% in sort of 2022 within the China region, right? Sort of that China conflict or trade tension has sort of died down, but we're sort of still seeing a focus on localization versus globalization, right, across the world. So it'll be good to see how they continue to handle that. And I think the last big one that when I was doing my research that came upon was sort of the legal case they had or dispute with Tiffany and Co. with that acquisition there. And I think that's going to be a big problem that they're going to face, right? When you become so big, similar issue with Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, people start to have a laser focus on your acquisitions and your takeovers, right? Making sure that you're not creating a monopoly, etc., etc. So yeah, those are the three key
Yeah,
areas.
no, cool. I think I'd maybe two areas of maybe challenges that they might need to consider moving forward, or they're thinking about. I think the first one is maybe the element of saturation. So Louis Vuitton net sales contributes around 40% of their net sales. Question is there a ceiling to how much they can sell with Louis Vuitton around the world? What is that ceiling? That could be interesting if you think about, and I can also imagine like every business is 80-20, right? So 80% of your sales is coming from 20% of your product. The other thing also is markets like China and India. So China's a huge economy, and I think a lot of people don't understand that China have their own brands that they develop, work, and scale. And so, will it continue to be? How much more room is left to grow in China? So that's perhaps some things for them to consider. I think the other thing is probably the point around counterfeits, right? This. How easy is it to spot a fake
Alibaba.
versus how easy is it to spot a fake versus a real Louis Vuitton product? I think we've all safe to say we've all seen fake products there in the market. Some people who actually have the money buy fake products because they know how much it actually costs to produce a Louis Vuitton bag. They don't want to, so therefore they're not spending the real price. So how does that play a role in their business moving forward? I even saw something along the lines of, could they leverage the blockchain to actually properly encode and track when someone has purchased a real product versus a fake one? So there could be, I think saturation could be something that I guess they've managed so far, but could be a challenge moving forward. Although you've mentioned a couple of points, and especially around the counterfeit, could be some interesting obstacles that they may need to manage in order to reach the next level of success. Any thoughts from yourself, Daniel, before we move on to what I think is another interesting area of Bernard Arnault and his empire?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I think when you look at the risks for the future, I think the counterfeit one is a major one. Whether that actually helps a brand or not is yet to be determined, because if you've watched the film House of Gucci and they saw fake Gucci products, they actually wanted to continue that. They were actually intrigued to know who made it, quite okay-ish quality, but also it means that people want it, it's in demand. And as you think about the rise of brands in China, I think there's still an exclusivity or a perception of exclusivity about Western brands, especially when people come from China to the West to buy those goods tax-free, and they buy lots of it, and a lot of their customers are from the Far East. When you look at future sort of competition or risks, I think it's more from a case of just continue them not diversifying. I think people always will make money, will always spend on luxury goods, whether they have the money or not. credit card debt, we know that's all-time high. People will spend on things they like, irrespective of whether they have the money. So I don't think saturation is probably a main point of concern. But I think it's just maybe also the brand's perception. Recently in France, the protesters in Paris stormed the Louis Vuitton HQ, the LVMH HQ, because Macron wants to increase the retirement age from 62 to 64. And many protesters are saying, take the money from the billionaires. And of course, Arnault is probably, I think he's either the richest or amongst the top 3 richest in the world right now with over 200 billion. So
He's number 1.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because with Tesla and Musk, he flips from 1 to 5 any other given day.
That's Ollie's guy, man. So just to sort of close this topic, last section I wanted to include was around this generational wealth and how they have planned. Succession planning in general has been a very, very important integral part for LVMH Group in general. And I think when reading more and more about LVMH and Bernard himself, I was very inspired by the way he has thought about playing long term and the way he's thinking about generational wealth and setting up and structuring his family. So just to give some context before we talk about his current level of thinking, as you remember, if you go back to the introduction, after graduating, he worked for his father's civil engineering business. That business was actually founded by his grandfather. So you already, by the time you've got to Bernard Arnault, you've got generations of steady, successful, just building business to business. So grandfather, his father, himself, and there have been, several articles out there, and he's made it very clear in public on how he is thinking about his fortune when he transitions. And he has 5 children. His oldest is a daughter, and he has then there's 4 boys. And every child has a position within the company. So it's either one daughter is head of Dior, the son then is head of the LVMH parent company. You've got a VP of Tiffany & Co, director of the watches, and also Tag Heuer. And every month he has a lunch with all of his children to understand, get their thoughts and ideas as to what they think about the business. And at some point, and what he's effectively doing is they're all auditioning, right, as to who's going to basically take ultimate control of LVMH Group moving forward. So I think it's just a fascinating case study, because we talk a lot about generational wealth. It's something which is near and dear to, I think, all of us. And here you actually see, hundreds of years of history with not only the brands, but also from a family standpoint, and how he's thinking about his family moving forward. Not an easy task, but at least he's kind of, shared a little bit of the plan. So I just wanted to maybe collect your thoughts on what you've picked up in how he's positioning the family and the structure. Everybody had to be well educated. Everybody had to have a position in the company. No one can just go off and do their own thing. What's your thoughts and your take on what you've learned about that side of his philosophy and way of thinking?
Yeah, I can chime in. Pete, I think whenever you see a lot of these successful, wealthy individuals, one of their downfalls is always their children, right? A lot of times people say, how long is your wealth going to continue, right? They say, as you're working hard, you're building your empire, which he's done, your kids don't have the same struggles, don't understand sort of the hard work, the graft, the complexities, what is needed to continue that legacy. And then they just basically waste that wealth to a point where in 2 to 3 generations later, you're back at 0, right? So I think the first element is he comes from a family of business owners, right? And I'm not talking about small business owners. It seems like from a young age, they're all educated and okay, how do you run the family business? He's implemented that with himself. When you look at his children, all of them are involved in LVMH. If there's a CEO role, I think he's got one son who's an executive. Let me just check it again. Yeah, one who's an executive vice president of Louis Vuitton. Another one, his second eldest son, was part of one of the luxury footwear brand. And Alexandra, his youngest son, who is part of a luggage making company, right? CEO, right? So it's not a situation where it's okay, just enjoy life, live a bachelor's lifestyle, enjoy my wealth. It's no, you need to be educated, you need to understand the running of the business. And I'm sure he's going to make a decision out of these 3 kids to decide who does he feel is best suited to take over from him when he's done. Another thing that I found quite
Three-
interesting.
3. What happened to the fourth? Why
He's got
why
five,
are you
he's got
discounting the
five.
fourth
No,
child?
he's got
Oh, the
five.
first-
He's got
sorry.
5. Yeah, it's
Five,
okay.
sorry. I'm saying
go
out
ahead.
of those 3 kids who are in more senior
Oh,
executive roles,
yeah.
right? And then lastly, if I think about another thing that I thought was quite interesting was the way he's set up his family business. So his family and everything, they've established a family holding company, right? Which allows him to sort of control the assets, ensure how it's managed strategically. He's probably got rules and obligations in which they need to follow. So one, he's able to obviously protect all the assets that he has. Secondly, there's probably tax benefits that he's got there. Being able to centralize the management and ownership and how that's coped with, and then really like a family governance, right? So if that's decision making, how decisions are going to be made, who's going to be able to sell companies in the future when he's gone, right? He's probably put together a whole play for the kids to continue following and handing down from one generation to another. So yeah, really insightful. But all of this obviously starts from number one, which is having a successful business, right? That you can pass. So lots of nice lessons for the listeners. But the first part would be, how do you establish a company or something big enough that you can pass on to your kids before then you follow step 2, 3.
Sure, Daniel. Any thoughts as to what you've heard there, what you've learned about how he's thinking about generational wealth? Do you like the sound of it? Do you think it's a good example to follow, or it's too much?
The man
Daniel,
can
you want to
do what he
go? Or
wants. Yeah, he can do what he wants. No, I honestly, from a different lens, I think it's very intriguing when you have such a successful business and have a large family or children that could possibly inherit your empire, because often that can create sibling rivalry at a young age. It can also be who's the best suited for this role. Naturally, you may think it's easy to give it to the eldest child, but how if the eldest child isn't entrepreneurial minded, business got good business acumen, etc. So then it may default to the next. So it's very intriguing to know, rather than from a higher level, but from a sibling level, what that creates between you and your siblings. Of I'm going to outperform you this quarter or this year for my group. So I think it's just from that angle, it's should you pass it on to your children? You should pass it on to someone else with a lot of family control within, then shareholders, voting rights, etc. I don't know, but it's just intriguing to see how he does it, because when you say doing monthly meetings to see who should own or who should inherit the business or take over or run the business, it's almost like a constant interview, which does create that, of course, the hunger, but also rivalry or competition, which sometimes is healthy, but for an ongoing lengthy period of time, I think can be quite negative. And maybe he should deploy a tactic of trying to give it, before he gets too old. And I think he's changed the corporate structure to continue to be at the helm till 80 or 80 plus. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because even if he does pass over ownership, if he doesn't naturally become a hands-off over time, he might feel like he needs to get into the weed of things if it's just a sudden process. I think he needs to do a quite a long five-year transition period to kind of get yourself out and let everything run without you having any input. But yeah, who am I? I'm not the one that built the empire. It's my business. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I of course, no, but I agree, Dan. I like that thinking, and I'm even as a fan, sitting on this side, hoping at some point, maybe soon, he can announce who the successor is, and they can kind of figure out a way to move forward in the sense of we know who will be the successor, and now that person is coached, and everybody within the family is sort of aligned. But again, I think fascinating topic. I think we definitely had to cover this topic because you're talking about the first European company that's reached 500 billion euros in valuation, and they're only going to continue to grow. Bernard, to your point, Daniel has no plans of retiring, only wants to continue growing. So it'll be interesting to see what the future looks like for LVMH. But I think it's just an incredible story on one, how business has grown through acquisition of prestigious brands, and actually how you can sort of, he is third generation, right? And what they say about third generation is usually that's where the wealth is lost. But he's grown to 236 billion and actually then has 5 kids in which then he's devising a successful plan for. So very, very, I think, some really, really cool, critical business lessons that we've picked up during this discussion. I'll just close by a quote that he is quite renowned for have said, and I think is good because it helps you to anchor towards the long term. He says, Bernard Arnault has said, money is just a consequence. I always say to my team, don't worry too much about profitability. If you do your job well, the profitability will come. And what that does is it really anchors him back to this long-term thinking view that he takes on everything that which he does. And as you can see, it's got him to number 1 on the Forbes list when other players are in the tech space, which moves a lot faster. So very, very interesting there. But with that, I'll leave it over to you, Daniel, to close.
Thank you all for joining episode 182 of Take Flight Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you've enjoyed the story of Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessey, and the empire that has continued to be at the forefront of this, fashion, cosmetic, beauty, luxury brands, different industries over the years and how it's grown. But as always, if you have any feedback for us, you can find us on Instagram at Take Flight Podcast. Find us on TikTok at Take Flight Podcast. Find us on YouTube at Take Flight Podcast. Wherever you consume us, it's Take Flight Podcast. Until next time, stay safe and God bless.
Take off, take